All right, thank you for coming here, and I hope you're not too tired after a long day, I can imagine. I'm a lecturer here in the department, and in my work, what I do is that I combine issues of urban infrastructures, cities, and environmental issues. And this presentation is going to be about smart cities, smart urbanization. So let me start a little bit with this image, because this is your typical IBM smart city image. And I like it because it somehow connects to my previous work, which was more on urban infrastructures and the way in which infrastructures configure the city. So infrastructures as socio-technical infrastructures, not only as the material dimensions, the pipes, but also the regulations, the social groups, the social organizations, the communities of knowledge. That's what infrastructure is about. And then when I look at that IBM picture, then I see the idea of digital systems in the city as infrastructure. And there you can see clearly the idea of data, the idea of data being ubiquitous, is everywhere in the city, of the emergence of new ways of seeing the city, new ways of understanding the city. I mean, data, of course, but also three-dimensional graphs and visualizations and charts and some form of statistics that is generated by data. And also, at times, you can see, perhaps not so much in this image, but you can see a form of digital nature. So there's the river, you can see trees, and an emerging digital urban nature that is permeated through data. So that's why I like to start this talk with that image, because it really enables you to start understanding digital systems as an infrastructural capacity within the city. So what I would like to do in this lecture is to examine the relationship between digital infrastructures and urbanism, and to start interrogating this idea of smart cities. Everybody talks about smart cities, but sometimes it's good to just say, hang on, what are they really? And what I would like to do is to look at different ways in which the smart city is imagined, thought of, configured, and what are what I call the rationalities and the techniques. Rationalities as ways of thinking and techniques as ways of doing in the making of this smart city. And I would like to just finish by very briefly looking at potential critiques. And this presentation has a lot of videos, so hopefully it's appropriate for the end of the day. And a lot of this presentation is based on a book that I'm writing with a colleague, which hopefully will come out in 2018 by MIT University Press. So I'm starting to test the introduction with you. So any feedback, that would be fantastic. And before I start, I would like to link this idea of smart urbanism with the new A-level geography curriculum. How do we make the links? And there's an obvious link in terms of contemporary urban geography, which is one of the 5 subject areas of the new A-levels. And from there, you can think about urban change, the ways in which the city is changing. But also there's potential links with issues of environmental sustainability, with urban climate, urban drainage, urban waste. So basically with the idea of resources in the city, with the potentiality to make a city more sustainable through digital systems, for example. And the second way in which this idea of smart urbanism links with the new A-level curriculum, it's through the idea of changing places, which is another of the key subjects of the 5 new subjects of human geography. With a focus on how people experience place, engage with place, particularly how through media, through the digital world, place could be experienced in a different way. There's also a possibility to think about a place that transcends multiplicity of scales, from the local to the regional to the national to the global, through these digital systems. And even there's a potential for using new innovative methodologies, things like geolocated data, geolocated digital sensors. We're going to to discuss digital sensors later on, and I have one of those at home. Maybe somebody could think about getting some for students. I would like to get some for my students. I'll show them to you later. And also audiovisual media and digital systems. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to talk about what is a smart city. I'm going to talk about researching smart cities, whether this is new in geography or not. There's a lot, it feels like it's very new, but actually perhaps it's not so new. And I'm going to dive into 4 specific techniques and technologies in the making of smart cities. Intelligent operations centers, which is one of the packages that has been developed by IBM, and they sell to municipalities. Also, the idea of data as if it was an urban infrastructure, data itself. Predictive analytics and the way in which cities are using predictive analytics. And also sensors, environmental sensors in different parts of the city. And then I'll finish with a little bit of a critical interrogation. So the first question is, well, the obvious one. What is a smart city? And actually, it's not that straightforward, because all cities want to be smart. Yeah? All cities, or many cities right now, are claiming to be taking steps towards becoming smart. So there's Smart City Plymouth, Smart City Bristol, Smart City London, Smart City Barcelona. It's like, okay, well, if there's so much smartness, who would like to be the dumb city then? Yeah? I mean, of course. So somehow, within the narrative of the smart city, there's a lot of aspirations. And that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to unpack this idea of the smart city. Because smart operates in a very discursive way, in a very aspirational way. It is an idea that is charged with very positive connotations. And of course, as municipalities or organizations mobilize this idea of smartness and smart cities, then they sort of mobilize as well ideas around economic growth, around optimization, sustainability, efficiency, better service provision, greater and more transparent citizen access, security, and so on. So somehow it is believed that the idea of smart brings with it all these positive connotations. It is somehow a way of imagining a very positive future for the city, even if that future still remains elusive, even if we still don't really know what that future is about. However, at the moment, to a large extent, the future of the urban in many places in the world, in many cities around the world, is being imagined through digital technologies, through the positioning of the likes of IBM and Cisco and Microsoft. And there's a quote here from the Financial Times, which speaks of how Boris Johnson, when he was mayor of London, of course, launched yet another smart city initiative in London. And of course, when you're confronted with everybody being a smart city, everybody trying to mobilize the idea of the smart city, there's a researcher at Newcastle University in sociology who has a really interesting article called "Will the Real Smart City Please Stand Up?" And really for him, this idea of the smart city is a high-tech variation of the entrepreneurial city. Sorry about my accent. I'm from Colombia, and if anybody doesn't understand my accent, just shout and we'll try to repeat. So in this idea of smart cities being the entrepreneurial city, well, you can think of a smart city as a discourse, as a narrative. But the smart city is not only a discourse, it's not only a narrative. There's also a set of technologies within the ICT world that are underpinning or working alongside these narratives. And for example, the fact that mobile phones and mobile apps are mobilized in order to make Amsterdam somehow, in one way or another, is just an example of the extent to which there's a particular set of techniques and technologies, not only in the narrow sense, but in a broad sense, a technology as a way of doing something. And when I think about smart cities, I always have an internal debate around, is this about technologies or is this about capacities? I'll get to that, but something that I'm excited about is the fact that there's an emerging group of geographers, sociologists as well, that are critically interrogating this idea of a smart city. Also, urban studies academics, STS, Science, Technology and Society, and they are acknowledging that discourse plays a role in the making of smart cities, but also technology. And they are starting to look at what technologies are used and how these technologies actually transform the city, the materiality or the digitality of these technologies, and with what consequences, with what positive consequences or with what negative consequences, creating what forms of inclusion or what forms of exclusion, and how smart cities are actually transforming the way in which we imagine the city, configure the city in practice, in our everyday. How do they transform the way in which we think about citizenship, the way we think about democracy? And hopefully, we're going to start to dig into those questions a little bit today. Perhaps not a lot, but hopefully a little bit. And when I think about, well, is it technologies or is it a set of capacities, I always think of, well, there's a lot of technologies going on here. Smartphone, urban apps, big data, city sensors, smart meters, smart grids. So is it about these technologies or is it about a set of capacities around real time, a city that is radically networked, multi-directional information flows? So now the energy system, the electricity system does not only speak to us by sending us information or electricity, but we also speak to the energy system by telling the energy system, I'm planning to do my washing at 2 a.m. in the morning. Is that okay? Or do you have enough energy? So there's this communication between us and the smart grid. Just to give you an example, feedback loops and learning so that the system learns. There's computer scientists that claim that infrastructure is now self-healing because of this learning that occurs through digital systems. And of course, the idea of sensors, electronic sensors everywhere. So far, I have portrayed this analysis of the smart city as something new. But to a large extent, various disciplines, geography, urban studies, computer science, have actually been looking at this idea of the smart city. And just to give you an example, since 2002, Nigel Thrift has been talking about the automatic production of a space, where he looks at how the spaces of everyday life are configured through software and through code, which installs some type of background that reproduces itself and we don't even notice it. Or Mike Crank, whom I understand you met this morning, he's been for years now talking about sentient cities, cities that sense because of sensors. And as they sense us, as they sense what's on our mobile phone, what we've done in the past, then they change advertisements, they change something, they send us a text message that says something. It's an idea where the space around us has the capacity to sense our presence and to intervene and transform. Somehow this sentient city has a memory, has a capacity to anticipate what we want. So there's already a lot of urban geography work on digital systems and urbanism. And also within urban informatics, there's a whole field. There's a whole field within computer science called urban informatics. And they look at things like ubiquitous computing, what happens when computers are everywhere, Wi-Fi geographies, how our experience of the city changes now that there's Wi-Fi everywhere and we can access Wi-Fi from everywhere. So there's a lot of interesting work happening in the past. So really what we're doing right now is we're just building on an existing body of work around digital systems, space, urbanism. So what I would like to do now is to talk about some of the actual techniques. And it's going to sound as if I'm promoting the smart city, but I'm trying to look at it analytically. And there's some videos here, and probably that's why it sounds like I'm promoting it. Because the videos are the videos produced by IBM or Microsoft or the different companies that are promoting this. And the argument that me and my colleagues are developing right now is that all of these narratives and discourses around the smart city and also the techniques and the technologies are resulting in an emerging computational logic of urban control, which is shaping how governing and power operates in cities, which somehow transmutes the city into an enterprise, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And computation here is a little bit of a metaphor, a little bit of a method, but also an organizing frame for how the city is being imagined and remade or made for the future. And I would like to look at 4 different techniques, and one of them is the Intelligent Operations Centers developed by IBM. I mentioned those already: data as infrastructure, predictive analytics, and municipal sensing, and how that could relate to ways of generating digital citizenships. There's more logics, standards, the standardization of the city through digital technologies, but even resistance, the way in which digital technologies could be used to resist power. So for example, in Hong Kong, civic hackers put together a whole website and system of communication in support of the pro-democracy movement in November of 2014. But I'm not going to talk about those ones because in the interest of time, really. And one of the main examples of these technologies is this Intelligent Operations Center. It's one of those off-the-shelf packages put by IBM and sold to municipalities, offered to municipalities and to local authorities. And if we look at the manual of the Intelligent Operations Center, we get an idea of how IBM thinks about the city, how IBM imagines the city. And the city is, for IBM, the city lacks integration. If you look at the quote, the city lacks real time. The city lacks memory. And the city generates an enormous amount of data that is unmanageable. And of course, the answer to these challenges is the Intelligent Operations Center, which integrates data, and through integrating data, integrates operations, integrates the provision of urban services. Now, something that is interesting is the extent to which the city here is seen as an enterprise. And if you look at this part of the quote, then you will see how they say that both the city and the enterprise face many of the same issues. You can track the way in which the city is starting to be managed as a logistical operation. Those issues that I mentioned just a minute ago, lack of integration, too much data, well, those are the same problems of the enterprise. And systems like these, which are based on the enterprise resource management systems developed by digital computer in the 1990s, solve the problem of the city. And perhaps the most famous Intelligent Operations Center developed by IBM is one that was commissioned by the mayor of Rio de Janeiro, and it opened in 2011. And this is how the New York Times sees this Intelligent Operations Center. Mission control built for cities. And I want to show you a little video of how IBM shows this Intelligent Operations Center.
As our world becomes increasingly complex, rapidly growing cities face unprecedented new challenges. Rio de Janeiro, while known for its rich culture, active lifestyles, and stunning natural beauty, is also burdened with crime, aging infrastructure, and natural disasters. Already a burgeoning city of 6 million, Rio now prepares for millions more as they get ready to host the 2014 World Cup and the 2016 Olympics. Like other forward-thinking cities, Rio realized it was in need of a new city operations plan to improve emergency response coordination, manage increased traffic, and improve services for citizens. Rio turned to IBM to create a smarter city by integrating more than 30 agencies into one centralized command center. The new Smarter City system gathers data from sectors across city operations, making it easy for security officials and crisis managers to monitor and respond to problems quickly. Data from sensors and video feeds create real-time maps and graphs, working to predict problems and counteract them. Weather monitoring systems forecast heavy rains with state-of-the-art accuracy, giving city officials the ability to anticipate floods and mudslides, alert the public, and send emergency support. The Smarter City system has improved emergency response time by 30%, making Rio a safer city. The result is a visionary city, equipped to react, predict, and plan for current and future events. But this is just the beginning. Rio's Smarter City transformation is set to expand to transportation, public works, and utilities. Every city, large or small, has its own unique challenges. Working with forward-thinking cities like Rio and more than 2,000 other Smarter Cities projects around the world, IBM is able to help make cities smarter.
So a while ago, about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, I spent some time in Rio de Janeiro doing research on this site. And it's actually quite impressive, I have to say. It has staff belonging to 32 municipal agencies and 12 private concessions, all of them working in the same place, exchanging information not only digitally but also on a one-to-one basis by having conversations. And as you can see, it's mainly a control room, very much like a NASA control room of the 1960s. One of the interesting features of this site is the way in which it engages with traditional and new media in its operations. So for example, there is a press room inside this control room. Radio and TV shows are constantly broadcasting from within the center of operation, talking about how the city is in real time. Information is also constantly being mobilized via Twitter, via Facebook, via Instagram, by the center of operations. So the center of operations has Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, etc. It has its own mobile phone application, and through a partnership with Waze, which is a Google-owned traffic management app that functions via crowdsourcing, a little bit like a sat-nav combined with Facebook, where people say, oh, there's a police car nearby, and it appears on the screen. Well, they access all of that information from citizens, and at the same time, they upload all that information for citizens through that Google application. And there's something very interesting in the way in which, through digital systems, the urban infrastructures become much more visible. Urban infrastructures that traditionally are hidden, we call them black box, they start to appear more visible. And also, there's something interesting about the way in which people, the public, starts to become a constituent element of the infrastructure itself. And I have here a quote from the chief executive of digital technologies of Rio de Janeiro from an interview, and he says that the integration between the center of operations and digital technologies enables citizens to be 100% part of the everyday life of the city. In this way, we go from 650 official cameras to over 1 million cameras. The more citizens use this technology, the more agile we can be. So there's something there about this breaking of boundaries between citizens and infrastructure, and this reconfiguration of infrastructural capacities through digital systems, through engaging with the citizen. The second technique that I would like to show you is this idea of the making of data as urban infrastructure. And I'm not going to talk about the ICT infrastructures of the mayor's office or of the city. So suppose the data centers, the data storage, the servers, the software, the hardware, the management practices. No, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the mobilization of data itself, of data flows as an urban infrastructure, which creates, in the words of Mayor Bloomberg, or the ex-mayor of New York, a data-driven city. And as they say in New York, a data-driven city is a city that intelligently uses data to better deliver critical services while increasing accountability through transparency. And what you can see in the photo is an app that is called New York City Tunnel Vision. And basically what you do is that you take your smartphone when you're inside the subway, and you point to one of the maps on the wall, and in your mobile phone you can see the same image as a camera, but you see the different subway tracks moving and the little carriages moving. So it tells you in real time how far are you from the next carriage, from the next tube metro, in a very graphic way, in a very interesting way. The mobile phone immediately accesses data servers of the transport office and transforms them into this little app. Here is an interesting quote from the London Infrastructure Plan 2050, which was published in 2014. In many ways, data can be considered a new utility that is flowing through the city's pipes. It is fast becoming a key element of planning and operating cities, the glue that integrates transport, energy, health, waste, and housing. So look at how data is mobilized as the glue that integrates. I find that fascinating. Many cities across the world are creating open data platforms. And the idea of open data, open information, which is almost an ideology within the IT world. But this idea of these open data platforms are data repositories, sometimes, although not always, not very often, updated in real time for the public to access the data of the city, to recombine it, to use it in their advantage. And of course, for the public, which is a very qualified and specialized public in computer information technologies. But it's usually a web page where you can access all of the information of the city, download it, and play with it. And the company that manages the open data platform of New York City is called Socrata. And it's a company that specializes in selling data services to municipalities. So I want to show you a video produced by Socrata where they say why data is important for cities in their perspective.
The world holds more than 7 billion people in nearly 200 countries, all producing data. Data that when brought together could solve problems, save lives, and teach us how to live together better. Who will have access to this data? All of us. Socrata's mission is to unleash the power of data to improve the world around us. And Socrata's most ambitious customers are not just sharing their data, they're using it to change the world. New York City. In October 2012, with Hurricane Sandy closing in on Manhattan, New York City posted updated information about evacuation zones, shelters, and food centers to its Socrata-powered open data portal. Developers then created dynamic digital maps for New York citizens. Kansas City, Missouri. In the heartland of America, a revolution is taking place. The leaders of this revolution want all government efforts tracked, measured, and reported to the public in real time. Who are they? A team of dedicated staffers at the city manager's office in Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City runs a performance measurement program called KC Stat. Every department keeps non-private data on the city's open data portal. That data then automatically updates public dashboards and internal reports, showing charts, photos, text, and maps that explain their progress against goals. KC Stat is credited with bringing more performance-oriented budgeting, greater awareness of best practices, and higher citizen satisfaction to the city.
Let's look at another technique, and it's this idea of predictive analytics. So it's not only the idea of open data available for all, but data used by the municipality itself in order to predict whatever is going to happen in the city. So we're actually going beyond real time now. We're going before time itself. We're starting to predict city operations, city events. And the city of Chicago is the first city in the world developing the city-wide real-time analytics platform, which actually is interesting that is partly funded by Bloomberg philanthropies. So you can start to see the connection there between Bloomberg and these processes, keeping in mind that Bloomberg actually made a business out of data flows. And the city of Chicago would like to develop this predictive analytics platform as an open source platform, which means that any other city or local authority can download the software and use it. And here in the photo, you see Brenna Berman. I was interviewing her about 2 years ago, a former staff member of IBM. So it's interesting how suddenly IBM starts to occupy these key positions within urban management, and is now the Chief Information Officer of the city of Chicago. And the mayor of Chicago sees this analytics platform as a tool that solves problems before they begin. And that's in his words, not in my words. And will fundamentally change the way cities operate. Again, in his words, not in my words. Now, the history of the platform is related to the ability of the city's police department to predict crime, to combine crime data in order to predict where a crime is going to happen. And that was obviously a little bit problematic. So they're not using it that much for predicting crime right now. They're using it to predict other metabolic flows in the city, other things that are perhaps much more mundane. And they are testing it to predict where rats are going to appear in the city before anybody has complained about a rat being there. Now, one could see that this is a little bit mundane, but actually Chicago has a reputation for being the most rat-infested city in the United States. So it's quite important for them, really. So I want to show you a little video produced by the municipality advertising this system.
Rodents exist in any large city, including the city of Chicago, unfortunately. They're unsanitary to have running around your neighborhood, and it's the city's responsibility to go and address that. However, we're not sure where the rodents are going to be at any given time. So we used data and we used predictive analytics to predict where rodents were going to be so we can address the problem before resident complaints or visitors come across a rodent and have to call it into the city. We need to make sure that when we go out there that we actually are taking care of the problem. Predictive analytics is when we take data that's happened in the past and try to predict an event before it happens.
The Smart Data Platform is an open source data processing platform that we're building to bring predictive analytics and big spatial data to the city's operating departments to help them make better decisions. So we can really use it to apply to any number of problems where the city is attempting to use resources more efficiently or effectively.
So our predictive model identified 31 different variables that predict where rodents are going to be within the next 7 days. There's a number of different reasons why rodents will be there, but primarily they're looking for a place to sleep and also a food source. So trash or any unsanitary habits tend to attract rodents, and then also places for them to live and hide, such as a vacant lot. So every day 311 data gets reported to the city of Chicago, and this goes from overflowing garbage to I've seen a rodent in my back alley. And every single night we run that through a series of algorithms to predict where we think rodents are going to be within the next 7 days. And in the morning there's a web page that gets populated with the address of everywhere we think rodents will be. And then streets and sanitation crews take a look at that information and they visit those addresses and look for rodents. They look for any sort of nuisance and they lay baits to address the problem. They'll look for the nests and then they'll lay a bait. And so then that information gets reported back to us and we use that as a measure of success.
When they approached me with this project and Tom had come to me and said, well, this is what we're going to do with the data that we have. And at first I thought there is no way that they can predict where there's going to be a rat. And I was a little leery of doing it, but I said, you know what, I'm going to go with the whole program. We did. The first time we sent a crew out there and they came back with some of the stats and stuff they found in that, I was amazed. And I couldn't believe it. So I was very impressed with it, and the way they put it together and how they figure it out, it's just amazing to me.
Data envelopes us on a day-to-day basis, and the average resident citizen needs to know what is data, how does it get collected, what is predictive analytics, and how do we take data and turn it into action, and what does that mean, what are the shortcomings. But overall, data literacy is a core component of 21st century skills.
It's interesting that not only data is a new urban infrastructure, but it's also a key literacy of the 21st century citizen. I mean, I'm not there yet, I have to say. So we'll see. Now, I was also interested in how Tom Shank, whenever he was interviewed with all these images behind, all these screen monitors, a little bit like the same logic of Rio de Janeiro. We can see the city. Now we can not only see it, we can also predict it. The last technique that I'm going to look at is environmental digital sensors and urban sensors in different parts of the city. These are different types of sensors owned by different groups, some of them owned by the municipality, others owned by private citizens, which are monitoring different types of urban flows. And we're talking about sensors that monitor things like air quality, pollution, transport flows, parking spots, noise pollution, pollen, waste bins, whether the bins are full or not full, water flows, precipitation and rain. And all of these sensors, are increasingly being interconnected via the internet, generating information that sometimes, but not always, is actually available to the public, again, to download and use it. And for example, what you see there is the web page of Barcelona's sensor platform called Centilo. Centilo, I don't know what it means, but in Spanish, sentir means to feel. I wonder if there's a relationship there. It's part of the Smart City program of Barcelona, and it's the web-based digital platform that links about 8,000 sensors owned by the municipality. And the municipality is trying to find ways to recombine the data that is generated by all of the sensors that they have in order to generate new insights and possibilities for action. And when you actually talk to them, they have no clue what they could do with this, but they have a lot of faith in that they will be able to recombine data towards efficiency and optimization. The platform sits at the heart of the city's urban operating system. Yeah, they have an urban operating system, or that's how they call it, which is part of the city's smart city architecture. So they have a smart city architecture as well. It's quite interesting, the terms that they use. It's interesting to talk to them because you can see how the IT department 15 years ago was in a basement and nobody would pay attention to the IT department. And suddenly the mayor wants the IT department next to him in the best office, direct access to the IT department. So even urban management is changing, and the power structures of within the municipality are changing. And what is interesting here is how the various ecologies of the city, water flows, pollution, earth, air, etc., become subject of some form of microspatial monitoring. And then these ecologies are reassembled in order to create new models of urban management, or ideally reassembled. I don't think that they have done it yet. And of course, the platform is what would allow you to reassemble these flows that have been dematerialized and made into data in order to generate new insights. Now, there is an example in Barcelona that I find a little bit more interesting, which is a type of sensor that is not owned by the municipality, but is owned by citizens. And it was developed by the Fabrication Lab of Barcelona, the Fab Lab of Barcelona, basically by a group of digital aficionados and engineers. And it's a little sensor this big. I have one at home and I forgot to bring it. Having said that, I'm still learning how to use it. I'm useless at that. But it allows you to access information about the ecology of the city. So it's a little sensor that allows you to access levels of pollution, noise. I'm not sure it is very accurate, but still the way in which they sell this technology is as a way of empowering the public so that the public has control over their own environment. And it's around the idea of citizens' science and the possibility of giving citizens control of their own local environmental conditions. So I'm going to show you a short video, or at least a little bit of that video, where they describe. Oh, this is the one that we were having difficulties to play, so we're gonna watch it from YouTube. By the way, you find all of these videos on YouTube if you need resources.
We invite you to participate in the deployment of a crowdsourced, interactive, worldwide environmental database.
We believe that we need to create tools for us as citizens to participate in the production of the city.
Smart Citizen Kit es un dispositivo electrónico que permite a los ciudadanos tomar medidas en las ciudades.
It's a piece of software and hardware that allows you to gather data about your environment and publish it to the internet and share it with other citizens.
The Smart Citizen Kit is an open source platform that comprises 3 technological layers: a hardware device, a website and online API, and a mobile app.
Smart Citizen Kit es un dispositivo electrónico con una placa de sensores medioambientales
That contains sensors that will capture data from our environment and that could be installed in our balconies.
So we have a CO sensor, we have an NO2 sensor, we also have a humidity sensor, a temperature sensor, a noise sensor, we have a light sensor, and we also measure the amount of wireless networks around you.
The second part of the project is an online platform, and maybe it's the most important one, because it's where the information is displayed and is shown.
La plataforma online recoge toda la información de los usuarios en tiempo real y la muestra al resto del mundo.
We did a platform that is open source, and electronic is also open source, so if you want to dig inside the complexity of the project, it's possible, but we also make it in a way that is really easy to use.
It's an API that's based on PHP and MySQL and other technologies, that it's able to collect this data, store it on the server, and then show it through the platform.
We already have a web platform that is starting to exchange data, but we want to push it much further, having an iPhone application.
The project is currently under a beta release and in the hands of a couple hundred users around Barcelona.
So they funded through a crowdsourced campaign. Oh, where am I? Is it maybe that one? Yeah. And when I bought one, they told me that they are selling a lot to universities in order to get students to, I mean, they were expecting to sell a lot of them to the public, but the public doesn't seem to be that interested in owning their own little device. But universities are, because they're buying in bulk in order to get students to play with digital systems and talk about resource ecological flows, etc. Quite interesting. One social scientist that I use a lot when I think about these environmental sensors is Jennifer Gabrice, who is in Goldsmiths College in London. And Jennifer has been asking questions about how these environmental sensors are configuring new forms of citizenship. And she points to a potential transformation in how we understand citizenship, redefined through the production and ownership of environmental data, so that citizenship is articulated via distributing, providing feedback, and monitoring data points. And it's interesting. I find it interesting how some academics are starting to point to the ways in which citizenship is actually potentially being transformed by this type of technologies. So with a few colleagues, we're trying to crack this agenda critically. What does it mean? Who wins, who loses? Rather than just saying, oh gosh, the smart city is the best, and thank God we're all going to become smart cities. And we notice how technology companies, some urban planners, cities, and some academics are claiming that smart urbanism is going to be the solution for the many problems faced by the city today. And their claims is that smart urbanism will generate jobs, strengthen the economy, optimize service provision, support in the achievement of urban sustainability, make the city's use of resources more efficient, reduce energy use, reduce water consumption, help dealing with climate change, build a more resilient city, build a more inclusive society, and so on and so on and so on. So the world of smart cities is full of these positive, optimistic claims. And I think that in fact it is true that the interface between digital technologies and urbanism is potentially transformative. But we need to think about this in a critical perspective as well. We need to unpack both the potential positive implications as well as get a better understanding of how are they going to affect the city in terms of governing strategies, issues of social justice, how power flows, etc. So we are asking questions such as how are these digital technologies reshaping urban governance? How are they transforming urban flows? What are the logics, the rationalities, the ways of thinking at play? The ICT way of thinking about the world that is now becoming also the ICT way of thinking about the city. And up to which extent these ideas of smart can actually embrace a progressive agenda. How would it contribute in positive or negative ways to issues of equality, issues of social justice? How is the knowledge of the smart city or around smart being constructed? How does it travel, that knowledge? With what exclusions? So as this knowledge is generated in certain parts of the city, who is excluded from this way of knowing? And what are the implications of populations that are excluding from this way of knowing the city? And how this is transforming the way in which we visualize cities, the way in which we imagine cities, what notion of citizenship is at play, and whether this notion of citizenship digital citizenship is being contested by social groups. And I want to finish with 4 very short critiques to the smart city that are being mobilized by some of our colleagues. And the first one is that the smart city is a form of technocratic governance. It's probably the first and main concern is that these digital technologies promote technocratic forms of urban governance, which presume that all aspects of the city can be measured, monitored, and treated as technical problems, to be treated or to be dealt with technical solutions. And it's a very instrumental way of thinking about government in the city, way of thinking about the city. We could call it solutionism. It's a belief that a complex open system such as the city can be disassembled into neatly defined packages and neatly defined problems that are solved by packages, which can be solved or optimized through computation. And it's the idea that we could solve the problems of the city if only we have sufficient data and the right algorithm. So, of course, these solutions that are mobilized are technically, or so it's claimed, rational, logical, impartial. And it's a technocratic approach that actually is very functionalist. It's about the function of the city, where the technological solutions focusing on managing the problems rather than actually addressing the underlying causes of the problems. And very often they are based on a technocratic command and control approach, which centralizes power and decision making. The second critique to the smart city is the corporatization of governance. So it's not only a technocratic governance, but it's also a corporate governance that is taking over the space of the urban through these rationalities, techniques, technologies. That the smart city agenda is actually driven by corporate interests, using the agenda to capture government functions and make them into market opportunities. And of course, it's interesting to see how key ICT players, from Cisco to Microsoft to Hitachi to IBM, are somehow becoming the planners of the future, the ones that are envisioning the future of cities. I think we should sit down and have a chat with planners about this. And all of these companies that I just mentioned have dedicated teams to think about the city, to think about urbanism. And there's an anxiety within smart city critics that these companies are taking over roles that are traditionally delivered by the state, which results in the promotion of neoliberal political economies, the marketization of public services, a reduction of the state, which is replaced where the state is replaced by external consultants, preferably from the IT world, service providers. And there's also a concern about technology lock-ins. Once a city adopts a particular technology from a particular technology provider, it might be very difficult to change providers 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, change technologies. So the extent to which cities can end up being tied up to particular technological platforms. The third critique to the smart city is that smart cities are based on a form of panoptic surveillance, which is one of the most common critiques. Of course, smart cities depend on on large quantities of data. Within the smart city, there are technologies that generate data on a constant basis, but also that recombine data in order to produce new information. Think about it this way: digital CCTV, smartphones, online transactions, credit card payments, sensors, scanners, etc. All of this data is being traded between data brokers on an everyday basis and is treated as a commodity, which raises obvious issues of privacy and surveillance. And there's an anxiety there around the smart city not being an empowering development, but rather the creation of a highly controlled and perhaps unequal society. So that's something that perhaps we need to look at in more detail. And finally, an awakening to the fact that technology is not neutral. Technology, data, or even the idea of data-driven governance create an illusion of neutrality. However, whilst data is portrayed as objective and non-ideological, and this is a quote from an IT document, simple measurements that reflect the truth about the world, and algorithms portrayed as grounded in a form of scientific objectivity, actually what data is collected and generated, how that data is processed and displayed, and what are that is the result of choices. That is shaped by ideas. There's a technical know-how, there's a public opinion that interact with this. So basically, data and technology have an embedded politics within itself. And what is more important, these digital systems that are mobilizing this data are not necessarily transparent. And there's an emerging set of geographies that are looking at algorithms and the way in which algorithms are a new form of black boxing the way in which certain processes operate, because we can't access the algorithm. It's buried. So that's a little bit of a finishing by criticizing the smart city. I want to mention resources that perhaps, if you're interested in using this type of material for your classes, your courses, your lectures, then I want to point to this. And actually, if you use any of these materials, drop me a line, let me know. I would really like to hear about what you're doing with these resources and with these ideas. There's plenty of videos in YouTube. I'm going to post the videos that I showed you on the website of the conference. There's a lot of print media. It's fantastic. There's articles in the New York Times. There's articles in The Guardian. The Guardian has a full series on smart cities. Every month, every couple of months, they're publishing an article. So it's a really good way of engaging students. I do it all the time with my students. And there's film. There's different films, Minority Report and other films that make you think about these questions. And there's also academic resources. Of course, this is a book that me and a couple of colleagues from the department edited a while ago. So, of course, I'm making publicity here for my little book. But it's got 10 articles that are highly accessible and state-of-the-art academic knowledge around smart cities. And it came out in paperback, so it's relatively affordable. It's more or less £24 in Amazon. But also, there's a series of articles, academic articles, that we're going to be putting on the website. So I'm going to put about 5-6 of the key articles that can give you a good picture of the topic. So keep an eye on the website. Thank you very much.